I had always been a simple guy, work hard, come home, and spend time with my wife, Rachel. She was my rock, my partner, my everything. We'd been married for 10 years, and while the spark wasn't as fiery as when we first met, I thought we were solid. Sure, she'd been distant lately, longer hours at work, constant texting on her phone, and canceled date nights. I chalked it up to stress. People go through phases, right? It was a Friday evening, and I was on my way home from work when I got a call from Rachel. Her voice was unusually cheerful. "Hey, babe," she said. "I've got a surprise for you tonight. Can you be home by 7:30? A surprise? That was unexpected. I smiled, imagining a romantic dinner or maybe tickets to a show. Rachel had always been full of surprises, and I figured this was her way of making up for how disconnected we'd been lately. When I got home, the house was eerily quiet. Rachel's car wasn't in the driveway, but there was a note taped to the front door. "Meet me at 2459 Maplewood Lane at 8 p.m. Don't be late." The address wasn't familiar, but my curiosity got the better of me. I quickly changed into something casual but nice, a button-down shirt and jeans, and drove off. The neighborhood was upscale, the kind of place we joked about moving to someday. When I arrived, I saw a house lit up like a Christmas tree, music spilling out into the street. Surprise party, I thought with a grin. Rachel had done this once before for my 30th birthday, gathering all our friends and family in a similar fashion. I parked a little down the street and walked up, feeling a mix of excitement and anticipation. As I stepped through the open front door, the noise hit me, a mix of laughter, chatter, and music. The living room was packed with people, many of whom I didn't recognize. Then I saw her, Rachel. She was standing in the center of the room, wearing a dress I hadn't seen before, something low-cut and far more revealing than her usual style. She looked stunning, her hair done up, makeup flawless. For a moment, I felt proud. She turned her head, her laughter ringing out, but the sound froze mid-note when her eyes locked on mine. Her face went pale. "Ethan," she stammered, stepping back slightly. The room fell silent. People turned to look at me, then at her, their expressions ranging from confusion to pity. It was like I had walked into a theater, interrupting the climax of a play I wasn't supposed to see. And then I saw him, a man, standing way too close to Rachel. He was tall, well-dressed, and far too familiar. His hand lingered on her waist, and his smirk told me everything I needed to know. I felt my stomach drop. My head started to spin, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What's going on here?" I asked, my voice loud enough to carry over the silence. Rachel's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The man beside her chuckled, a low, mocking sound that made my blood boil. "I think you walked in on the wrong party, buddy," he said smoothly. I ignored him, my eyes locked on Rachel. "What is this?" She finally spoke, her voice shaky. "Ethan, I can explain." But she didn't. Instead, she reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "No need," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I think it's pretty clear what's going on here." The man shrugged and took a sip of his drink. "You're making a scene," he said casually, as if he hadn't just been caught with another man's wife. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But instead, I turned to the crowd, who were still watching like spectators at a car crash. "Enjoy the party," I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "It looks like you've all been having a great time." Then I walked out. As I got into my car, my hands were shaking. My mind raced with questions. How long had this been going on? How many people in that room knew about it? And, most importantly, how could Rachel do this to me? The drive home was a blur. When I got there, I sat in the driveway for what felt like hours, staring at the empty house. Memories flooded my mind. Our wedding day, vacations, lazy Sunday mornings. All of it felt like a lie now. When I finally went inside, I saw Rachel's things scattered around. Her shoes by the door, her jacket on the chair, her favorite mug on the counter. I wanted to smash everything, but I didn't. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. I needed answers. I needed someone to tell me what to do. And that's how I ended up here, on Reddit, typing out this post. If anyone's reading this, I could really use some advice. What would you do if you were me? I sat at the kitchen table long after hitting post, staring at the screen as comments started pouring in. Most were supportive, people expressing shock, anger on my behalf, and suggestions for what to do next. Some were harsh, telling me I should have seen the signs. But one comment stood out: go back to that house. You deserve answers. Don't let them laugh behind your back. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Were they laughing at me now? Was Rachel spinning some story to paint me as the bad guy? My chest tightened at the thought. I grabbed my keys and headed back to 2459 Maplewood Lane, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was quieter now when I pulled up, though lights still glowed in the windows. A few cars were parked along the street, and I recognized Rachel's near the driveway. I sat there for a moment, weighing my options. Was this the right move? Would barging in again solve anything? But I needed to know. I walked up to the door, my footsteps heavy. The music was lower now, and as I stepped inside, I saw the party had thinned out. A few groups of people lingered, chatting and sipping drinks, but the earlier energy was gone. Then I spotted Rachel. She was in the kitchen with the man I'd seen earlier, their heads close together. She wasn't laughing now. Instead, she looked anxious, her hands wringing together. The man looked annoyed, gesturing as he spoke in hushed tones. Ethan. The voice came from behind me. I turned to see a woman I didn't recognize, her expression a mix of pity and nervousness. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. Who are you? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated. I'm a friend of Rachel's. Look, I don't want to get involved, but maybe you should just go home. I ignored her, pushing past into the kitchen. Rachel, I said, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. She froze, her eyes wide as she turned to face me. The man beside her looked irritated, but didn't say anything. We're talking. Now, I said firmly. Rachel's mouth opened, but no words came out. The man finally spoke up, his tone dripping with condescension. Look, buddy, this isn't the time or place. Why don't you go cool off? I stepped closer, my fists clenched. Who the hell do you think you are? Ethan, stop, Rachel said, stepping between us. Please, just let me explain. Then explain, I snapped. Because right now, all I see is my wife at some stranger's house with a guy who clearly has no respect for boundaries. She flinched at my words, her eyes darting to the man beside her. Fine, she said, her voice trembling. You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. I braced myself, every muscle in my body tense. This is Mark, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. He's my boss. I blinked. Your boss? She nodded. Yes, and we've been seeing each other for a few months. The words hit me like a freight train. My stomach churned, and I felt like the floor was collapsing beneath me. A few months? I repeated, my voice hollow. Rachel nodded again, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean for it to happen, Ethan. I swear. It just did. Mark, the smug bastard, finally chimed in. Look, man, this isn't easy for anyone. But Rachel and I didn't let him finish. Shut up, I said, my voice dangerously low. You don't get to say anything. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but the smirk never left his face. Why? I asked Rachel, my voice cracking. Why would you do this to me? To us? She looked away, her tears spilling over. I don't know, she whispered. I felt lost. We've been so distant lately, and Mark, he made me feel wanted. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I just stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew. I trusted you, I said finally, my voice breaking. I loved you. Rachel started to sob, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. I'm done, I said, turning to leave. Ethan, wait. She called after me, but I didn't stop. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit me, and I realized I didn't have a plan. My marriage was in shambles, my wife had betrayed me, and I had no idea what to do next. I got into my car and drove aimlessly, my mind racing. Eventually, I pulled into a parking lot and sat there in the dark, scrolling through the comments on my Reddit post. One caught my eye. She's not sorry she did it. She's sorry you found out. Don't let her manipulate you. The words burned into my mind. They felt true. Too true. I knew I couldn't go back to how things were. But what came next? How do you pick up the pieces when the person you built your life around shatters it in an instant? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let Rachel or anyone else make a fool out of me again. I barely slept that night. My mind was a storm of anger, sadness, and humiliation. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel standing next to Mark, her face frozen in shock when she saw me. I wanted answers, real answers, not the vague excuses she gave me at the party. The next morning, I decided I couldn't face her alone. I called my best friend, Tyler. "Dude, I need your help," I said the moment he picked up. "What's going on?" he asked, his tone serious. "Rachel's been cheating on me," I blurted out. "With her boss. I walked in on them last night at some party she invited me to." There was silence on the other end of the line. "Are you serious?" Tyler finally asked. "Dead serious." He let out a low whistle. "All right, I'm coming over." 30 minutes later, Tyler showed up with 2 coffees and a determined look on his face. We sat in the living room as I recounted everything, from the note on the door to the confrontation in the kitchen. "Man, that's messed up," Tyler said, shaking his head. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I need to figure out how long this has been going on and who else knows about it." Tyler leaned forward. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. At the party, it felt like everyone knew. Like I was the only one in the dark. People were staring at me like I was the idiot who didn't see it coming. "Then we need to find out who knew," Tyler said firmly. "And why they didn't tell you." His words lit a fire in me. It wasn't just about Rachel anymore. It was about everyone who had been complicit in her betrayal. We started by making a list of mutual friends who might have been at the party. Tyler suggested reaching out to one of Rachel's co-workers, Emily, who had always been friendly with me. "She's not the type to keep quiet about something like this," Tyler said. I hesitated but agreed. I sent Emily a text, asking if we could meet for coffee. To my surprise, she replied almost immediately, "Sure. Is everything okay?" We met that afternoon at a small cafe. Emily looked nervous as she sat down across from me, her hands fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Ethan, what's going on?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Emily, I'm just going to be straight with you. I found out last night that Rachel's been cheating on me with Mark." Her eyes widened, and she covered her mouth with her hand. "Oh my God," she whispered. "So, you didn't know?" I pressed. She shook her head. "No, I swear I didn't. But I'm not surprised." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" Emily glanced around nervously before leaning in. "There have been rumors for months. People have seen them together, out for drinks after work, leaving the office late. I didn't want to believe it, but I guess it's true." Her words confirmed what I had feared. Rachel's affair hadn't been a one-time mistake. It was deliberate, calculated, and worse, people had known about it and said nothing. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked, my voice cracking. Emily looked down at her cup. "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe they thought it wasn't their place. Or maybe they didn't want to get involved." I clenched my fists under the table, anger bubbling to the surface. "Well, thanks for telling me now," I said, standing up. "Ethan, wait," Emily said, reaching for my arm. "I'm sorry. I really am. You didn't deserve this." I nodded, unable to say more, and walked out. As I drove home, I felt like I was unraveling a thread that would lead to something even darker. Rachel's betrayal was bad enough, but the idea that so many people had known about it made it unbearable. By the time I got home, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit around and let Rachel dictate the narrative. It was time to confront her, this time, with no one else around to interfere. That evening, Rachel came home, her face pale and drawn. She knew there was no avoiding what was coming. I was waiting in the living room, the tension in the air so thick it felt like it might snap. "Ethan," she said softly, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the couch. My voice was steady, but inside, I was a storm. She hesitated, but after a moment, She sank into the cushions, her hands folded in her lap. Talk, I said simply. She looked down, her fingers fidgeting. I don't know where to start, she murmured. Try the beginning, I snapped. How long, Rachel? How long have you been lying to me? She flinched, her eyes darting up to meet mine. 6 months, she said quietly. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. 6 months. Half a year of betrayal, deceit, and lies. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my composure. Why? I demanded. What was so wrong with us that you thought this was the solution? Rachel's eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I needed answers, not crocodile tears. I don't know, she said, her voice trembling. I felt lost, unappreciated. Mark, he made me feel important, like I mattered. Important? I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. And I didn't? The man who's been by your side for 10 years, through everything, didn't make you feel important. She shook her head, fresh tears spilling over. It's not like that, Ethan. I didn't mean for this to happen. Don't give me that, I said, standing up and pacing the room. You don't accidentally cheat on your husband for 6 months. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Over and over again. She didn't respond, and the silence only fueled my anger. Did you love him? I asked after a moment, my voice quieter now but no less sharp. Rachel's head snapped up, her eyes wide. No, she said quickly. It wasn't about love. It was… I don't even know what it was. I laughed bitterly. Convenient. You don't know what it was, but it was worth throwing away everything we had. Ethan, please, she begged, standing up and reaching for me. I know I messed up, but I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. I stepped back, out of her reach. Fix this? You think this is something you can just fix? You shattered my trust, Rachel. You humiliated me. You lied to my face for 6 months, and you expect me to just… what? Pretend it didn't happen? Her lip quivered, but I didn't care. I was done being the guy who always put her feelings first. Who else knew? I asked, changing the subject abruptly. What? She asked, blinking in confusion. At that party, everyone was looking at me like I was the idiot in the room. Who else knew about your little affair? How many people were laughing behind my back? Rachel hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything I needed to know. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely audible. Bullshit, I snapped. You know exactly who knew. Tell me, Rachel. She hesitated again before finally speaking. A few people at work, she admitted, but they didn't say anything. They didn't want to get involved. Of course not, I said bitterly. Why ruin the fun when you can just sit back and watch the drama unfold? Rachel took a step closer, her hands clasped together. Ethan, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. I want to make this right. Please, just give me a chance. I stared at her, my emotions a tangled mess of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. You love me? I said finally. If this is your version of love, Rachel, I'd hate to see what hate looks like. Her face crumpled, and she sank back onto the couch, sobbing into her hands. For the first time, I felt nothing. No sympathy, no pity, just emptiness. I'm done, I said, heading for the door. Ethan, wait, she cried, but I didn't stop. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation hadn't brought closure, but it had solidified one thing. There was no going back. Now, I just had to figure out where to go from here. The days after the confrontation felt like a blur. Every corner of the house was a reminder of Rachel. Her scent lingered in the bedroom. Her favorite mug sat on the kitchen counter, and even the sound of her car pulling into the driveway used to feel comforting. Now, it all felt suffocating. She tried calling me repeatedly, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. The text came next, long paragraphs about how sorry she was, how she'd made a terrible mistake, and how she wanted to fix things. I didn't reply. Instead, I focused on gathering myself. I started sleeping on the couch, avoiding our bedroom entirely. Tyler came over a couple of times, bringing beers and distractions. He knew better than to press me for details or push me to talk. But what finally snapped me out of my haze was a knock at the door one evening. When I opened it, I was surprised to see Emily, Rachel's coworker, standing there. She looked nervous, clutching a folder to her chest. "Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" I hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. She walked in, glancing around as if expecting Rachel to appear. "She's not here," I said flatly, closing the door. Emily nodded, looking relieved. "Good. I didn't want her to know I came." "What's this about?" I asked, gesturing to the folder she was holding. Emily hesitated before handing it to me. "I thought you should see this." I opened the folder and felt my stomach churn. Inside were printouts of emails, Rachel's emails. They were between her and Mark, filled with flirtatious messages, explicit details, and even plans for their nights together. It wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown relationship. "Where did you get these?" I asked, my voice shaking. Emily looked away. "Mark is careless. He leaves his computer unlocked at the office. I saw some things I wish I hadn't. After I talked to you the other day, I felt guilty. You deserve to know the truth." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. One email caught my eye. It was from Rachel to Mark, dated 2 months ago. "Ethan's clueless. I'll tell him I'm working late again. See you tonight. Can't wait." The rage that boiled inside me was unlike anything I'd ever felt. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was mockery. She'd lied to my face, night after night, and then laughed about it behind my back. "Thank you for this," I said, my voice tight. Emily nodded, looking uneasy. "Ethan, I don't know what you're planning to do, but please be careful. Mark's not a good guy. He's manipulative, and he has a lot of connections." I scoffed. "I'm not afraid of Mark." She looked like she wanted to say more, but thought better of it. Instead, she gave me a weak smile and left. That night, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the emails spread out on the coffee table. My mind raced with questions. How could Rachel have done this? Was she really sorry? Or was she just trying to save face now that she'd been caught? The next day, I decided to meet with a lawyer. If Rachel thought she could play me for a fool, she was in for a rude awakening. The lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Linda, listened intently as I told her everything. When I handed her the folder of emails, she flipped through them with an arched brow. "This is solid evidence," she said. "If you want to pursue divorce, this will work in your favor." "Divorce," I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. It wasn't what I wanted, at least, not at first. But now, it felt inevitable. Linda leaned forward, her expression serious. "You need to protect yourself, Ethan. People like Mark don't care about the damage they cause. And Rachel, well, her actions speak for themselves." I nodded, feeling a mix of anger and determination. "What's the first step?" Linda smiled faintly. "Let's start by filing." That evening, I sent Rachel a single text. "We need to talk. Come home." When she arrived, she looked hopeful, her eyes red from crying. "Ethan," she began, but I cut her off. "Sit down," I said coldly. I placed the folder on the table between us. "Care to explain this?" Her face drained of color as she flipped through the emails. How did you get these?" "That doesn't matter," I said. "What matters is that you've been lying to me for months. You didn't just betray me, you humiliated me." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. "Don't. I don't want excuses, Rachel. I don't want apologies. I want honesty, for once." Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. "I was selfish," she admitted. "I thought I could have it all. I didn't think I'd get caught." "Do you even love me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Tears streamed down her face. "Yes, Ethan, I do. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I love you. I swear I do." I shook my head. "Love doesn't look like this, Rachel. Love doesn't lie, cheat, and destroy everything in its path." Her sobs grew louder, but I felt no sympathy. I'd spent enough time feeling sorry for her. Now, it was time to take control of my life. "I've already met with a lawyer," I said, standing up. "You'll be hearing from her soon." Rachel's sobs turned into wails, but I walked away, leaving her alone in the living room. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was done letting Rachel's betrayal define me. The morning after filing for divorce felt strangely liberating. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't consumed by confusion or indecision. I had taken a step forward, and though the path ahead was uncertain, it was mine to walk. Rachel, however, was a wreck. She spent the night in the guest room, and I could hear her muffled sobs through the wall. It didn't faze me. Her tears couldn't erase what she'd done, nor would they undo the months of lies and betrayal. By mid-morning, she knocked hesitantly on my office door. I didn't look up from my laptop when I answered. "Come in." She stepped in, her face pale and puffy from crying. "Ethan," she started, her voice trembling. "Please, can we talk?" I leaned back in my chair and folded my arms. "About what? You've said everything I need to hear. You wanted Mark. You got him." Her lips quivered, and she clasped her hands together as if begging. "I don't want Mark. I made a horrible mistake, and I know I've hurt you, but I want to make this right." I let out a dry laugh. "Make this right? Rachel, you didn't just cheat on me. You humiliated me, lied to me for months, and destroyed everything we built together. There's no making this right." She stepped closer, her voice rising in desperation. "Ethan, I was lost. I didn't think clearly. I didn't think at all. I know I messed up, but I love you. I don't want to lose you." I stood, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You didn't think clearly? Rachel, you planned this. You lied about working late. You sent those disgusting emails, and you paraded me in front of your coworkers as some clueless fool. This wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Over and over again." Her tears came again, but I was unmoved. I walked past her, heading to the kitchen for coffee, but she followed. "Ethan, please," she pleaded, her voice cracking. "Can we at least go to therapy? Talk to someone? I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this." I turned, coffee mug in hand, and looked her square in the eye. "Therapy won't change who you are, Rachel. It won't make you loyal, and it won't bring back my trust. We're done." Her sobs turned into angry frustration. "So that's it? You're just giving up on us?" I raised an eyebrow. "Giving up? Rachel, you gave up on us the moment you crawled into bed with another man. I'm just accepting reality." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. For a moment, I stood there, staring at the spot where she had been. Then, I took a deep breath. I had a lot to do, and her tantrums weren't my priority. The following week was a whirlwind. Tyler helped me pack up Rachel's belongings, stuffing them into boxes and moving them to the garage. I didn't want her things in my space any longer. "You're really doing it, huh?" Tyler asked as we taped up another box. "Yeah," I said, tossing a roll of tape onto the counter. "I'm not going to live with someone who doesn't respect me." Tyler nodded approvingly. "Good. She doesn't deserve you, man." The next step was notifying our families. Rachel's parents had always been supportive of our marriage, but I wasn't sure how they'd react to the news. To my surprise, they were horrified. Not at me, but at Rachel. "We had no idea," her mother said over the phone, her voice shaking. "Ethan, I'm so sorry. I don't know what got into her." "It's not your fault," I replied, though hearing her apology brought an odd sense of comfort. A few days later, I received an unexpected text from Emily. "Mark's been fired." HR found out about the affair. I stared at the message, rereading it several times. It felt like a small victory, knowing Mark was facing consequences for his actions. Later that evening, Rachel came home in a panic. "Ethan," she blurted out, "Mark's gone. They fired him." "Good," I said simply, not even looking up from the book I was reading. She blinked, stunned by my indifference. "You don't understand. He's threatening to sue the company. He's blaming me for everything." I finally looked at her, my expression cold. "And that's supposed to be my problem because—" Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. "Ethan, please," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." "You figure it out," I said. "That's what you wanted, right? To be free of me? Well, congratulations. You got it." She stood there for a moment, as if waiting for me to say more, but I didn't. Eventually, she turned and walked away, and I felt nothing but relief. That night, I logged back onto Reddit and updated my post. Filed for divorce. She begged. She cried. But I'm done. Her AP got fired, and now she's left scrambling. I feel lighter than I have in years. Onward and upward. The responses poured in. Words of encouragement, validation, and solidarity from people who'd been through similar experiences. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. I was finally taking back control of my life. The first morning after Rachel officially moved out, the house felt eerily quiet. The space that once felt too small for the two of us now seemed impossibly large. As much as I hated to admit it, the silence was unsettling. But it also felt like a blank canvas, a chance to rebuild my life without the weight of her betrayal. I started with small changes. Her favorite decorative pillows, the ones I always found annoying, went straight into the trash. The photos of us on vacations and holidays, packed away in a box, shoved deep into the closet. It wasn't about erasing her. It was about reclaiming my space. Tyler stopped by later that day, carrying a six-pack of beer and a stack of paint swatches. "You're not just sitting around and moping, right?" he said, dropping the swatches onto the coffee table. "Nope," I replied, cracking open a beer. "I'm making changes." He grinned. "Good. Because I was thinking, new walls, new furniture, maybe even a new car? Start fresh." I chuckled. "One step at a time, man." The first real challenge came when I went back to work. My coworkers were polite but cautious, clearly aware of what had happened. News like that spreads fast in an office. A few close friends pulled me aside to express their sympathy, while others avoided the topic entirely. One colleague, Amanda, caught me in the break room. "Hey, Ethan," she said hesitantly, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "I heard about Rachel. I'm so sorry." "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. She hesitated before continuing. "For what it's worth, you've been handling it really well. I don't think I'd be as composed if I were in your shoes." I managed a small smile. "You do what you have to." Her kindness was unexpected but appreciated. It reminded me that not everyone in my life was complicit in Rachel's betrayal. A week later, I received a text from Rachel. "Can we meet? Just to talk?" I stared at the screen, my gut twisting. Part of me wanted to ignore her, but another part knew that I needed to hear her out, not for her sake, but for mine. We met at a neutral spot, a small cafe near downtown. She looked tired, her usually flawless appearance replaced with dark circles and a sense of defeat. "Thanks for coming," she said softly as I sat down. I didn't respond, waiting for her to speak. "I know I've said this before, but I'm so sorry, Ethan. I know I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know that I regret everything. Losing you has been the worst thing that's ever happened to me." Her words felt hollow. They were too little, too late. "Why are we here, Rachel?" I asked bluntly. She looked down at her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. I just wanted to see if there was any chance we could fix this. I've started therapy. I'm trying to figure out why I did what I did. I don't want to give up on us." I let out a bitter laugh. "You gave up on us the moment you started your affair. Therapy doesn't erase what you did. It doesn't bring back the trust you destroyed." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't stop. "I'm moving on, Rachel. You should too. We're done." She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. "I understand. I had to try." When I left the cafe, I felt an odd sense of closure. Her apology didn't fix anything, but it reminded me that I was on the right path. Back home, I logged onto Reddit and shared another update. "Met with her today. She's trying to save face, but I made it clear I'm done. Starting therapy myself soon, not because of her, but for me. It's time to focus on rebuilding my life. Thanks for all the support. You guys have been my rock through this." The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, filled with stories from others who had walked similar paths. Their words gave me strength, reminding me that I wasn't alone in this journey. Over the next few weeks, I started piecing my life back together. I joined a local hiking group, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. I started cooking more, experimenting with recipes I'd never tried before. One evening, Tyler invited me to a barbecue at his place. It was a small gathering, just a few friends, but it felt good to be surrounded by people who genuinely cared about me. As the night wore on, I found myself laughing more than I had in months. For the first time since the party, I felt like myself again. When I got home, I looked around the house and realized it no longer felt empty. It felt like mine. The weeks turned into months, and with each passing day, I felt stronger. Rachel had moved out completely, the divorce papers were being finalized, and I had started building a life that didn't revolve around the wreckage she'd left behind. Therapy was one of the best decisions I'd made. It gave me the tools to process the anger and heartbreak, to see Rachel's betrayal for what it was, a reflection of her flaws, not mine. My therapist, Dr. Morgan, often reminded me that healing wasn't linear. Some days I felt like I was on top of the world, and other days, the memories crept back in like shadows. But the difference now was that I had the tools to face them head-on. One afternoon, while sorting through old files on my computer, I stumbled across a shared folder Rachel and I used to keep. It was mostly mundane, vacation photos, receipts, and random notes, but then I found a file labeled, "For Ethan." Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it. It was a letter. "Ethan, if you're reading this, it means I couldn't bring myself to tell you everything face to face. I know I've already hurt you more than I can ever make up for, but there's one thing I need you to know. Mark wasn't the only reason I cheated. I'm not writing this to justify my actions, but to give you the closure you deserve. For years, I felt like I was losing myself. I let insecurities and doubts consume me, and instead of confronting them or talking to you, I sought validation elsewhere. It was selfish and wrong, and I will carry that guilt for the rest of my life. I know I've lost you forever, and I don't blame you. You deserved better than me. I just hope that one day, you'll find someone who can give you the love and loyalty I failed to provide." Rachel, ****. I sat back, staring at the screen. The words felt heavy, but not in the way I expected. There was no spark of hope, no lingering desire to fix what was broken. Instead, it felt like the final piece of the puzzle, an acknowledgement of the pain she caused and the fact that we were truly done. As the divorce proceedings came to a close, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and an overwhelming sense of freedom. I'd spent so much of my life defining myself as Rachel's husband that I had to rediscover who I was without that title. Tyler and I celebrated the finalization of the divorce with a night out, something simple but meaningful. As we sat at the bar, he raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, grinning. I clinked my glass against his. "To moving forward." A few weeks later, I got an unexpected email from Rachel's mother. She asked if we could meet for lunch, saying she had something important to discuss. Though I was hesitant, I agreed. When I arrived at the cafe, she greeted me with a hug, her face lined with worry. "Ethan, thank you for coming," she said. "No problem," I replied, though I wasn't sure why I was there. She sighed deeply. "I wanted to apologize on Rachel's behalf. She's been a mess since everything happened. I know it doesn't excuse what she did, but I thought you should know that she's truly trying to change." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "There's something else," she continued, lowering her voice. "She told me about Mark, how he manipulated her and pressured her into things she didn't want to do. I'm not saying she's innocent, but I think she was in over her head." Her words hit me like a brick. It didn't absolve Rachel of her choices, but it painted a more complex picture. "I appreciate you telling me," I said finally, "but it doesn't change what happened." "I understand," she said with a sad smile. "I just wanted you to know that she's not the same person anymore." That night, as I sat alone in my living room, I reflected on everything that had happened. Rachel's betrayal, the lies, the pain. It had all shaped me in ways I couldn't ignore. But I also realized something else. I wasn't defined by what she had done. I logged onto Reddit one last time and updated my post. "It's done. The divorce is final, and I'm finally free." Rachel's betrayal broke me, but it also forced me to rebuild myself into someone stronger. For anyone going through something similar, it gets better. Slowly, painfully, but surely. Focus on yourself, and don't let someone else's choices define your worth. Onward and upward. As I hit post, I felt a wave of peace wash over me. This chapter of my life was finally closed. The road ahead was mine to walk, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready.